My name is Joshua Vonderheide, and I'm the founder of the Percussion Conservatory, and I am so honored and welcomed and excited to have Dr. Andrea Venet here with us today on A Percussion Story. She is the Associate Professor of Percussion at the University of North Florida, as well as the Area Coordinator for the Percussion Department. Andrea, thank you so much for being on A Percussion Story. We're honored to have you, and I want to get right into these questions. Here we go. Tell us a little bit about your early musical background and your first experience with percussion. And when did you know you wanted to major in percussion or music?
Well, I first started out in fourth grade playing the violin. So I joined orchestra in public school. And then in sixth grade, I started piano lessons. And I did that all the way through middle school and was pretty serious about my violin playing. And then when I got to freshman year of high school, my next door neighbor, actually they lived across the street, they were in the marching band and they wanted to start a front ensemble. And so they recruited me to join marching band freshman year of high school. And so that's where I kind of learned how to play the xylophone. The front ensemble only had two people. It was me and my neighbor, Jeff.
Wow.
And so because I could play the piano, they're like, yeah. So I basically figured it out, I guess, and joined band that way. And then my sophomore year of high school, we moved up to the Phoenix area, Gilbert, Arizona. I went to Gilbert High School, and they had a large, competitive marching band, with went to drumline competitions and went to Southern California for band competitions. And so then that's where it really kind of took off. I had really great teachers and mentors, percussion teachers there, and kind of got the bug for competitive marching band and percussion. All my teachers who were teaching the front ensemble had done the Lee Stevens seminar. Liz Beiersdorfer, Steve Ridley, Casey Farina, they were also students at ASU. And so they kind of took me under their wing, and that's where my love of marimba began. And so I was really hardcore about marching band and drumline, and I also did orchestra all through high school. And actually there was quite a few of us who were string players and in drumline. So it was pretty fun, actually. A lot of my good friends, we were doing both. And then I decided to major in music and do percussion in college. So I went to Arizona State. And so for my first year, actually, I played violin also in orchestra, and I did percussion. But I eventually switched completely to the dark side and just stuck with percussion, I think, because it was just...
The dark side. I love it. Yeah.
Percussionists have more fun. So, but I think, there's a lot of violin players, and I think there's a lot of creative things, and it's just a different kind of, a different kind of collaboration and creative scope that I found with doing percussion. So
that's so cool. I mean, and yeah, percussionists do tend to be multi-instrumental. So that would make sense, if you were already going in that direction. Obviously, you're a big composer as well. So you're very horizontal with your musicianship. You've got a wide breadth here. That's awesome. The only other person who's had this story that I know personal, I don't know if you've ever met him, is Tomoya Mori, who I went to school with. He played double bass and percussion, and he majored in both of them, which wow. I was like, this guy, I can barely get through percussion. You're doing two and strings, it's like, wow. So yeah, that's a phenomenal achievement for you to be able to do even a year of both of them. I was drowning my first year in school. So that's just amazing. That's totally crazy. And speaking of school and going to college, I'd love for you to give us an overview of your collegiate percussion training, prominent teachers, the schools, the festivals, just what helped shape who you are today in terms of your musicianship.
Well, I think it all really started, like I said, in high school. My mentor and really good friends now, Liz Beiersdorfer and Steve Ridley, Casey Farina, they were my percussion teachers and also going to ASU at the time. And then J.B. Smith was at Arizona State when I was there. So he was my professor at ASU. And then I went to Rutgers for my master's degree when Shi Wu was there, and Krista Vinny and Alan Abel. And that's also where I met my dual partner, Annie Stevens, because she was also a student there. And that's kind of not when Escape 10 started, but when we met, we started playing together and became friends. And then I got my doctorate at Eastman School of Music. So Michael Burritt was my main professor there, a really influential person and mentor in my life. And then I do have to give a shout out. When I did drum and bugle corps at the Santa Clara Vanguard, and Jim Ancona was our main front ensemble guy. And I learned a ton from him as well. And he was totally like the method of movement, Lee Howard Stevens kind of marimba geek. And so I was really lucky because I started that sort of approach in high school with really good teachers. And then kind of, you do drum corps and you're doing technique and you're playing for hours a day. So I had a really good foundation, I think. People who were classical marimbists, within the marching realm, that's where I learned how to play percussion. So I never took private lessons in high school or did elite summer festivals. I did public school and drum corps. And so that's where I learned a lot from those
I
people.
love that. Man, young people out there, don't sleep on drum corps. This is this is a big theme. I was just standing next to the amazing Mark Griffith in the Houston Symphony, drum corps guy. Went to
Mhm.
school with Nick Taylor, ended up in the Navy band, drum corps guy. There's so much. Chad Crummell, also in the Navy band, marched a ton, front ensemble. It's a really, really powerful way to upskill yourself. There's just so much playing. And I felt like I had so much of that in high school. I was part of one of these Texas super competitive high school drumline programs. And so I did a lot of it. And by the time I got to college, I was like, I can't do it anymore. I'm so tired. I just can't do it anymore. But if you've never done it, wow. It changes the way it changes your relationship with your hands.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It builds care. I wouldn't be who I am. I met my husband doing drum corps actually, because he was in the ensemble too. But I was really lucky. I had really great. I mean, Jim was there and he was awesome, and like Dave Reeves was on tour with us, and then Jim Casella and Murray Gussick and Glenn Crosby and Rob Hardiman. I mean, it was like a really big heyday for Vanguard. So it was these amazing people in charge of this marching activity, but they were all fantastic musicians also, and I think that was really the big takeaway. Like they did the drum corps thing, but then, like Murray Gustick's an amazing drum set player, and Jim Casella is a big composer, and Jim Icona is a really big educator and pedagogue, University of Delaware, and so I got lucky. So I've had a lot of really good teachers, and that is definitely a huge part of who I am and a huge impact. So.
And how you got so good. She's really good, folks. You got to see her play. I saw you play at PASIC, and I was just like, man, like that is just gorgeous marimba playing. Have you ever had a chance to go see Dr. Venet play live? You got to do it. You got to do it. Are you any chance you're doing any more PASIC stuff? So people, you're doing percussion conservatory. We get to see you play here. Any other stuff out publicly coming up soon?
Not probably. I don't. Nobody know. I mean, not for PASIC as far as like those sessions aren't even done yet, but. I did a session a couple years ago, and then Annie and I played an Austin Keck session last year. But I just released a CD. So actually the session you were at, a lot of that stuff was on my recent album called Revelations, which I released in November of this year. So that's like the last big project. And then I have like some composition stuff coming up.
It's 2025. It's now November of last year. I'm so sorry.
Last year. Yes, correct.
I know, it's crazy. It's the new year. It just came for me this year, man. The new year just roar. I was so busy. It feels like this year, but
yeah.
Maybe drum corps is one of these things. But I'd love to know what defining moment in your life has had the most significant impact on your career.
It probably has to do with composition. And I've told this story a few times. Growing up, I played a lot. I love to practice. I love performing, and I love teaching. I dabbled. Well, actually, when I was teaching marching band and drum corps and stuff, I was really into arranging, and so I wrote a lot of pit books and kind of stuff like that. And when Annie and I started Escape 10, I made some arrangements for us to play because at that time there wasn't a lot of duo stuff. There's way more now. That was only like 13 years ago. So, I would kind of generate stuff for those purposes, but I never really composed anything. And it's something that I'd always wanted to do. And I'd been sitting on a lot of ideas. And I think when I was in my doctorate, I was very busy as a full-time DMA student and playing in all the ensembles and stuff. And so I just didn't have that brain space to dive into that. I know Bert was like, he would like encourage me, you gotta compose, Renee. But I think after I moved to Jacksonville, I started at UNF. It was like within my first couple of years, my first piece I ever wrote was Kibo, which Bob Becker, actually, he was one of my teachers too. He taught for Sheehy while she was on sabbatical at Rutgers. And he was like, I want you to compose a snare drum solo. And I was like, I'm not a composer. What is this? So then I had to find a tune I like, which is Africa by Toto, which is really groovy. So the rhythms in that piece are based off of that. And so when I taught a sabbatical replacement at OCU and I had a semester to be a grown up and a teacher, not in school, I took a semester off of Eastman to do that. I kind of had some time. So that's where I pulled Kiwo back out and made like the ensemble arrangement. And that was like my first composition. But fast forward like probably 3 years, I guess, like to 2018, I was at a summer festival and I played a performance and I lugged my gear and I was playing Bach and I was like stressed about playing Bach because Bach is playing stressful, especially when it's on not your own instrument and without a warm up and etc. And,
Mm-hmm.
I did my session and it was fine. But I was sitting in a session just like watching somebody give a clinic using their own music as the vehicle for that. And I thought, man, it would be nice to be able to just use your own material to kind of do this thing. And then I just sat there and I reflected and I was like, okay, well, how many people are like writing their own music and then using that as the vehicle for their presentations and what they're doing? And I immediately came up with 10 people like who do that.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Burritt, Ivan Trevino, Casey Cangelosi, Scott Herring, Mark Ford, blah, 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 blah. Like the list goes on and on. They're doing their thing. They're creating music and they're using that. And that's what they use as their vehicle. And then it struck me like none of them were women. And I wasn't trying to come to that conclusion at all, but it was really impactful in that moment, sitting in that auditorium. And I was like, in that moment, I gave myself permission to start composing and try to do that and just see where it ended up. So after that festival, I went off the grid for a couple weeks and I didn't do email or social media or anything. And I just stayed at home and I just wrote music and did that. And so I wrote Lava, which is my first marimba solo. I finished Chromio, which is a multi-duo. And I wrote Green Ranger, which is my 5 pieces with ensemble. And I did that stuff. And then I gave recital at school in the fall and premiered those pieces. And I haven't looked back ever since, I guess. So
that's amazing.
Moment I gave myself permission to write music because I had the student mentality, like, what's the new hippest, sexiest marimba solo that everybody's playing? Is it Con or is it, Velocities or whatever? And you're just kind of in that mindset. And it was like, well, I'm not a composer. I'm not trained in composition. And so I just gave myself permission to kind of jot down these ideas that had been rattling around in my head. And I see how that went and it kind of took off. And now I have commissions and stuff. And so I think that's a dramatic addition to what I do as a musician. And I've had to make space for that, So I think that would be a really significant moment in my career. Yeah.
That's so wonderful. Yeah, you mentioned Ivan Trevino, who did classes with us, and specifically he did a class with us from seed to song, which helps people give permission to just write down the shortest little seed of an idea and maybe just go with it. And I often tell a story as well from a Jacob Collier video that really resonated with me, where he says, just make the worst piece possible as your first piece. Like if you're afraid to compose, give yourself, as he said the same thing, give yourself permission to just make something awful, truly awful. And then it'll never be worse than that. And once you've made your bad piece, once you've made the worst piece that anyone has ever heard, you can go from there. And it's so powerful. And I was very into composition while I was in college. I used to do all the little, they called it composition for non-majors. They had these like little contests and showcases. And I did a bunch of them and just loved it. And ended up going a little bit different direction with music production. But the same feeling exists of just the creation of need. I think as artists, even if you're just writing a tune for someone's birthday or a wedding or something, like it's healthy to create in a way that's not only performing, because performing is kind of like a craft. It's just like a discipline. It's something we good at doing. But true, like composition is just like pure creation. And I think it makes you a better performer when you create from nothing. It's a really beautiful experience.
I think like now that I'm thinking about it, because I don't even think I've thought about it this way, but I like the last time I was in school, like getting my doctorate, like I did a lot of improvising. Like I had to take classical improvisation class for grad students. Like when you teach the methods class, you have to they kind of go through the jump right in learning by ear kind of thing. And so that's something, you know, we're not taught how to do that in a structured way a lot of times in school. And so I found myself doing a lot more of that and just improvising, and then also doing some jazz vibraphone. And I
Hmm.
think, you know, when you're arranging stuff, which I had done a lot of for marching band, basically you're improvising, you're coming up with new material to fit in the construct of the existing material. You know, like the front ensemble has to play cool stuff that's extra and different and complementary to what's happening in like the wind book. But so I'm sure that, you know, like that foundation is really important too, because, you know, it's like you gotta be able to make stuff up and be creative and take the format of what you're looking at and make it into
Right.
something, whether that's a melody or rhythm. And so I think probably doing that a lot really kind of paved the path for when I was out of school and not a student anymore to, like, you know, just write stuff down and
Right.
improvise. So
Yeah. It's very interesting. It's very, like you said, it's like these sorts of interactions. Oh, it's like, oh, I haven't thought about it this way, but yeah, that's right. You know, it's like
yeah,
that is how I got here. And that's why we love doing these interviews. It's always interesting to just like take the curtain down, and, you know, people see you as a famous marimba player, and you're at this big school and you teach and you're a professor, and it's like, oh yeah, there was a time when I was like not even a composer at all. Oh yeah, how about that? You know, like, and that's really important for everyone to hear. It's like, if you're out there right now and you have something inside you that says, maybe I should try this, here you go. Like, this is the success story maybe that you needed to hear. So, by the way, you're doing this in the middle of a snowstorm. Segue. Are you okay? Did you go sledding? You know, are your students okay? Is everyone doing all right with
well,
this historic
they did
storm?
cancel school, which is
Okay.
hilarious, but there is no snow. I'm looking outside. I think I'm in Jacksonville, so I'm in like the top northeast corner of the state. And at one point, my weather app had a little snowflake, but then when I opened it, it went away, and it's just kind of cold, and there was like some frost. But in the Panhandle, they are getting snow. I have seen that on the news.
Hmm.
But sadly, I woke up with childlike wonderment, hoping there'd be snow and the dog could see snow, and I haven't seen anything yet. But I did cover my plants. I'm sure my neighbors saw me wrestling with big sheets as the wind was blowing, because it was really windy yesterday, like trying to cover my super tropical flowers. So
Oh,
who knows if they'll make it? But yeah, but it's
well,
cold. It's cold for
it's, yeah. We have snow here in Houston for like real snow, like an actual honest snowfall since I've been here since I was a child. So it was, yeah. It's whatever's going on, man. Woo! More electric cars, something. I don't know. Like, yeah, it's a scary time out there. Like when I'm seeing like 8 inches of snow in Houston, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I saw that it was happening there too. So I wanted to see what was going on. But kind of funny. There's no snow, but they canceled school. I guess they're just trying to be precautious.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I understand states that don't know how to deal with snow. Our state is in Florida, like they're really good about like the hurricane stuff, and like, yeah,
Right.
they're
Right.
really good with the disaster, and they did the state of emergency. But I think the big thing, especially in the Panhandle, like people don't know how to deal with ice. They
Yeah.
don't are equipped to de-ice the roads. People don't know how to drive in that kind of weather. So I think, you know, to keep people safe. But a lot of times in Jacksonville, even with the hurricanes, it's like we luck out and don't get the worst of stuff. So
Yeah. Well, hope, knock on wood, everything stays that way for you. All
I
right.
wish.
Very good. How about this TikTok ban? It's going, it's not going. What is going on with this thing? All right. But you're active on social media. We get to follow along with your story. I'm just wondering how that's played a part in your career.
Um, well, I think social media is a necessary evil. Honestly, a lot of times I want to just throw my phone into the ocean. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not
Hmm.
on. I only really now use Instagram and Facebook, and even on Facebook, everything. I just put stuff up on Instagram and it sends it to Facebook. I think it's an important way to get yourself out there, but you kind of have to. It's a necessary evil. Like you kind of have to do that to promote what's happening, especially when you're younger. Um, but I do think it's not good for mental health, and I think it sucks up a lot of time, and I'm guilty of that. Like I'm on sabbatical right now. I'm trying to not waste so much time on social media, you know.
Sorry. YouTube. No.
But I mean, you know, I mean, I think it's a powerful tool, but also it's it's got its, I think a lot of people feel that way. I think especially when we were home in 2020 during the pandemic and nobody had anything to do but be on their phones, I
Mm-hmm.
felt my anxiety and my mental health like really, really suffer when you're just looking to see what's happening next, like on the phone. And there's, just it's crazy. So I've almost like totally gone off a few times, but yeah. So Instagram, it's dogs,
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, that's what I want to see.
I love that. If you're out there and you're feeling the same way, like, man, this social media, I feel like I have to do it. I feel like it's necessary, but I don't really want to do it, but I kind of feel like I have to do it in this arts world so people know what I'm doing. I get gigs and freelance connections. I mean, for us as a company, as Percussion Conservatory, 100% vital. You have to, otherwise, how will people know you even exist at all, right? It's for an online digital media company. However, personally, I don't have social media on my phone anymore, but I do post all our social media from my computer. And so that
Mhm.
has been a really nice adjustment for me personally, feeling like social media is just part of my workflow. It's not part of
Yeah.
my being like notification, notification, notification. And guilty. Sorry, everybody. I've been responding to less comments that way, which I think is not great for the social media algorithm, but has been good for Josh and being a father of my son, Maximus. Like that is an important um, that's an important life balance thing, because it's not like we have a team of social media people for every artist. Like you're not going to have an agent who does your social media for you, and so you are kind of responsible for it. We do have a course with this that just came out with Adam Tan, who is the overlord of percussion social media, right? And he has like shown you exactly, if you do want to go down that path, how to do it well. And I think that that's good too, because sometimes you feel like you're doing all this work and it's just going to the void anyway, and then that causes even more anxiety. I mean,
Yeah,
I know.
I think good
Yeah.
ways to streamline it, right? And kind of, how to, I don't know, like people that monetize, like the peak times and all the metrics, I guess, which I don't know, Like,
Next question, she said. Done with social media talk. All right, thanks, Josh. Anyone knows you knows you're a big runner. What do you enjoy most about running? See, I have questions for everything, Dr. Venet. Everything. We don't want to talk about social media. We're going to go run outside. No phones.
it's like the hot ones questions. Uh, so I started running kind of during the pandemic ish. My husband wanted to run a marathon, so that was a big deal. So we trained for that. And then I always hated running until I didn't hate running. And I was like, well, I want to do that too. And I think when we were all like stuck at home, outside running is the only time I felt like I was in control of anything. And it was kind of liberating, good for my mental health. So I started doing that more. And then it was like, well, I want to do a marathon. I did a half marathon. That's, 13 miles. Didn't think I could do that. And then I did that. And it was a really positive experience. I did the Donna. Jacksonville has like the Donna Marathon, which is to raise awareness for breast cancer. So you have breast cancer survivors and people supporting it and families of that. So it's like a really big event. And that's what was my first half marathon. And that was just such a positive experience with all the people, cheering people on and seeing that it was kind of like the first big event where I was like, oh, this is like really cool. I wonder if I could do a full marathon. But I think running just helps me feel good and sane, and I can eat and I can, don't feel so guilty about having nice beer. So
Yeah, yeah. People who run to drink. Yeah, I know that's such a funny. That's such a funny like trope. It's like such a. I feel like that's very American too. Like I lived in Asia for a while. Like they don't talk about that. They don't. They're like, I run so that I can drink. Like that's not part of the conversation. But I hear that all the time in America. We're just like, dude, the food is so good here. I got to work out so I can eat more. It's like it's I love it. I love this. It's so perfectly. And maybe also in the South, like man, our food down here, Houston food is so good. It's
Mhm.
really so good. What are your favorite? I mean, now we're talking about food. Sorry. What are your favorite food spots there near you? Like what type? What style? Like what do what do you gravitate towards?
The fish is fresh, so I think
Mm,
that's really nice. Like mahi mahi's the fresh catch everywhere, which before I lived here, I thought, oh, you can only get mahi mahi in like Hawaii or
Right.
something. But so I think I like there's like some local joints where it's just really fresh fish. So we eat a lot of fish.
Mm.
Like it used to be called Safe Harbor, but it's now called Dockside. Same owners. It's on the Intercoastal. It's a cute place. That's where I send people who are auditioning at UNF, families that are
Oh,
visiting.
that's nice. I've got
Um,
speaking of your studio at UNF, I've got a great question for you with UNF, which is that you have a very tight bond with your studio. And from the outside, it looks like it's like one big family. And I'm wondering how did you build that culture at UNF and what is your teaching philosophy there? Because I feel like, in the studios I've seen within the United States, I feel like you have something really special going on with that, aspect of what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. That's like a huge compliment. I am. I I think we are pretty tight knit. I think one of the things when I first started at UNF and what I strive for is sort of a top down approach and just a positive environment where everybody's supporting each other. Everybody's different. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, but it's not just every person for themselves, kind of, you know, doing their own thing or me just facilitating people getting degrees. I think um, the mix of people is important and how they interact is important because that's best for success. And so, with my grad students, I have mentorship assignments for them. So, they kind of keep an eye on the undergraduates and, kind of watch out for each other. I think the school's not huge. So there's a lot of accountability in all the
Mhm.
classes with all the professors. If somebody's like not showing up, you know, we hear about it or, so I think that's kind of nice. Like everybody's kind of, you can keep tabs on everybody. We spend a lot of time together. I'm teaching lessons, percussion ensemble, and pedagogy classes and literature classes. And,
Yeah.
I'm in the hallway. I'm the only office that's down on the first floor around all the practice rooms. If I yell from my office, they can hear me. So like, um, but I think, I just think it's regardless of your major, whether it's performance and music education or music technology, I think everybody needs to be a good musician and everybody needs to do their best and be held to a high standard of um, productivity and excellence. But I try to think about every student and their needs and their abilities, in mind within a unified curriculum. So, and I think, was really impactful to me is seeing Mike Burritt and how he runs his studio, both at Northwestern and at Eastman, because I was a student, a lot of his grad students, like Annie went to Northwestern with him and then went back to Eastman. And so a lot of his grad students were former students from undergraduate degrees. So I was kind of different because I had done 2 degrees at 2 other schools. And I think from afar, when I would meet him and students at marimba competitions and stuff, there was just always something there that I really admired, just how everybody carried themselves and, you know, how they were as musicians and as people and stuff. And so it's kind of like, I want that, and after going there, it's like, I want to model my studio after this. So that was really, really important with, I guess, I went there because I wanted to model that. And so that
Yeah.
was a really big thing. But yeah, I think, but you gotta have fun too. I think, like, so we have a lot of fun, but they work really, really hard. And so I think
That's
that's,
yeah, that's a beautiful answer. And the going through the education process of becoming a professional percussionist, any classical musician is grueling. It's very, very difficult, and there's lots of imposter syndrome along the way, and doubts along the way, and all. And you have to have, especially I feel like at that age, 18 to 22 kind of range, like there, you have to go through it with others. That's kind of the nature of what we do. Is all based on community. Almost everyone in the classical music community makes music with others. There's very few who makes music only by themselves,
yeah.
like so few. And so I think it's not just important. I think it's one of the things that you should look for. It's one of the things you should consider as a student. If you are
Mhm.
applying to college programs, you should just ask the alumni, find some alumni and be like, hey, what's the vibe? How was your experience there? Don't just ask one. Sometimes one person had a bad experience and it's like, hey, that doesn't mean anything. Ask a few, especially if it's, if you've limited it down to like a few studios that you're really considering. It is an important aspect. So I just feel
Mhm.
like that's something that's happening at a really high level at UNF. So
Well, thank
congrats.
you.
And speaking of family, Majestic, who sponsors this podcast has been like family to me. They, in the early days of Percussion Conservatory, helped us get all these instruments so I can teach and perform and practice and be at a high level. And they treat everyone that way that I have ever seen at PASIC, at Midwest, at TMEA. Majestic's really been like one big family, and we're super honored to be sponsored by them. They're our principal sponsor at Percussion Conservatory, and we just had a major scholarship competition where our winner from South Korea, Miss Gaeun Oh, just won $8,000, and she's getting an Opus One drum, and she's also getting some Sabian cymbals and stuff. And so we're just so thankful and grateful to Majestic. And Dr. Venet, I'd love to pass it over to you if you want to shout out anyone who's helped you on your journey as well.
A huge shout out to my lovely sponsors, Malitech here, this beast behind me. I love my marimba and vibraphone. Also, Black Swamp Percussion, they're great. They make the best accessories around. Dream Cymbals, the luscious gongs and cymbals that we use, and then Remo drum heads. They're really great as well. I use all that stuff and I love it. So thank you for all your support for me.
Thanks, everybody. And this is now a new year, and there's new stuff, and we have a new president, and there's Stargate, and everything's happening, and it's all new. And I'm wondering what's new with you and what's coming up this year. And I know we had briefly touched on this before, and we were talking about it, but just tell us what's going on. What's on the pulse with you?
Well, I'm on sabbatical. On my research agenda while I'm doing that is composition and maybe some methods. So maybe a marimba roll chorale method book, some polyrhythmic melodies, and some composition projects I have started that I just haven't had time to do while I'm teaching full time. So those are kind of in the works. And then let's see, I'm going to Argentina with UNF with the music mentors in May, I think, again for the second time. And then, gosh, the usual stuff. I'll be popping up at Days of Percussion later in the year. Doing my thing. I just released an album, so that was the last big project, and then maybe get another puppy.
Oh, okay. So baby brother or sister for Riker. Do we know yet?
Little sister, yeah.
Little sister. Oh boy. Okay, go follow her immediately on Instagram, everybody. Immediately. Yeah, the social media is the devil, except when we get to see baby dogs. Are you kidding me?
That's all anybody wants. That's all.
Just show me your puppy. What's one thing that most people would be surprised to learn about you?
Wow. I don't know. I'm pretty much an open book. Do you know?
No, I don't. If I knew, I wouldn't be surprised to learn.
Goodness. I mean, I have synesthesia where you associate colors with notes and chords.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know that was a thing until I was at Eastman. They did some sort of cognitive study that I signed up for as a volunteer. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. My parents were like, that's why you see the colors. Cause yeah. But I mean, gosh, I can't think of anything really.
And you mentioned before polyrhythmic melodies, and you also mentioned con variations. I was like, oh, this is all going together. When you're saying polyrhythmic melody and you're saying synesthesia, is that something that you feel like, kind of in a good way, like infiltrates your compositional process? Are you thinking in colors as you write?
Yeah. I think like I love Radiohead. When I listen to Radiohead, I hear the colors. So when In Rainbows came out, it was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. But I definitely, like when making recital posters or just kind of, I don't know, I always associate kind of shades of color with things. I was like, oh, that's actually, a thing. So I think that for sure. So I have my favorite colors and I have my favorite keys. And then I love polyrhythms too. I really love polyrhythms. So I'm hoping to make melodies that are polyrhythmic so that it's easier to remember the polyrhythms.
Wow, that's very cool. That's super, super interesting. And you mentioned Radiohead. Tom York, does he have synesthesia, or was that album just based around color, or what did you mean by that?
Oh, every song, well, because the album art is just beautiful. It's just splatter, kind of abstract. It's really beautiful. And every song has a strong color, I guess. And so just kind of, and I saw them live in concert actually for that album tour. And they had the stage lit up with huge lights, and for every song it was something different, and it was a lot of it was exactly the color that I associated with it, so it was just really, it was the bomb, man. It was really cool.
I love it.
It was rad.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions that we've got for you today. And it was so lovely getting to know you a little bit better, Andrea. And I am so excited that you're coming to teach with us. So I just wanted to quickly shout out to everyone that Dr. Venet is coming to teach with us here at Percussion Conservatory very, very soon. And we are really excited to, dive deeper into not only your philosophies of teaching, but just actually seeing you play a little bit, because as I was saying before, when I saw you play at PASIC, I was there's just a way that you move and a way that you express yourself at the instrument that I feel like is so valuable that people need to see you play. And so that's why we decided to have you on, and we're really excited about it. Did you want to talk a little bit about anything about your upcoming classes?
I think we're going to talk about, well, the title is called Movement Matters, which is elements of movement and motion with the hands and the body, and why that is important when you're playing keyboard percussion instruments. Because it really is. It impacts sound and accuracy and fluidity and all that stuff. And then I'll have some playing examples too of some arrangements here. And yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to your residency with us next month.
Thank you. Me too.
All right. Awesome. Guys, it's been another percussion story. Have a good one. See you at the next one.